Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the She's Bold podcast. This is where you will hear one-on-one conversations with women who have inspirational stories to share. These are women who are breaking new ground in their fields, who are changing their stories, their self-talk, and they are overcoming their doubts. Basically, they're saying yes to the world, and they are pursuing the things that perhaps at one time they weren't so sure that they could accomplish. Now, I started this podcast because, one, I'm a fan of them. I love podcasts. And two, because I wasn't hearing enough from women guests on the shows that I enjoyed. So I decided to tackle this myself and bring you these fantastic conversations. And I have to say, it has been so rewarding to get to sit down with these ladies and learn from them. Now, I always pick up some gem, some moment of inspiration from every conversation. I hope you do too. And that does include today's guest, whom you will hear about in just a moment. First, if you like what you hear and you want to support this ad-free show, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Be Bold. Patreon supporters help me bring these conversations to you, and you can do so by becoming a patron for just $5 a month. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus audio content, have the ability to submit questions for me to ask guests, and ladies are invited to become part of a private Facebook group. Now, shout out to Cindy. Thank you, Cindy. She's the most recent person to join our community, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate Cindy and all of my other supporters who get the value of bringing these conversations to the world. Okay, I was really psyched to have the chance to sit down with today's guest, Kelly Lewis. Now, I've known Kelly for a long time from the travel world. I even spoke at her conference about 7 years ago. But we never had an opportunity to just sit and talk at any length. She just recently moved to Portland, and on a trip that I took down that way, we finally had a long overdue chat. Kelly is the founder of Women's Travel Fest. She's also the author of a guidebook series called Go Girl Guides, and she runs Damesly, a women's tour company. So as you can imagine, we have a lot of things in common. In this episode, we talk about her growing up in Hawaii with little chance to travel off island. We talk about her move to the mainland for college and then getting hooked on travel after she graduated. She then moved to New York. So we talk about how she just took the city by storm and she built her businesses there. And then her most recent move to Portland. And that's Oregon, of course. We also talk about how she came about building her businesses and why her move to Portland has been so great for her. We recorded this a few weeks ago, and she does mention Women's Travel Fest. And I want to clarify that Women's Travel Fest is coming up on March 6th through 8th in New York City. So if you're in New York or you can get yourself there, there are still some tickets available for that wonderful event. And I'll link to it in the show notes, but you can also search online for Women's Travel Fest. Okay, with that, please enjoy this conversation with Kelly Lewis. Hey, first thing I would love to know, I'm so curious, and I don't think I've asked you this before. Why do you have an 808
because I grew up
number?
In Hawaii.
I know. Tell me more.
Yeah.
So did you? So you grew up in Hawaii, but when did you leave?
After I graduated high school.
But did you have a cell phone then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
my cell phone number is like my only number ever. So if you knew me in high school or elementary school, actually I didn't have a cell phone until like middle school, late middle school, early high school. But yeah, I've kept my same. It's like the last thing that I will not get rid of. I'm like,
you should never, because anytime there's an 808 call coming in for me, I always take it because I'm like, yes, Hawaii. Who's calling me from Hawaii? And spammers don't use 808.
Yeah, they don't. They don't. And it's always like, especially in dating, it's always like a topic of conversation. Like, oh, 808.
I know.
Well, yes, I grew up in Hawaii. Yeah.
Hey, well, you know what? If the guy knows what 808 means, then that's a good start.
Yeah,
at least
totally.
on a date.
Yeah. They don't tell me if they Googled it or not, but
Yeah. Well, yeah. So what? At least they would be interested enough to Google it.
It's
you know,
true.
right? Curious
It's
enough
true.
to do that. So that's cool. So you are in Portland now, which is super cool because, gosh, the last time I saw you was, I think, embarrassingly enough, was probably at the Women's Travel Fest in New York years ago when I spoke. But you had been living there. Were you living in New
Yeah.
York at that point? Okay. And you've been there for a long time, or you were there for a long time. How many years?
yeah. 6.5 years in New York. And by the end, I was so ready to be done.
I remember seeing your posts
Yeah.
about
I was really exhausted.
Yeah. So tell me about that experience for you.
Yeah, so I grew up in Hawaii, right? So that's like an important piece of this puzzle. And then started my businesses in Tucson, my first business, Go Girl Guides in Tucson. And then went on a big cross-country book tour when I decided to move to New York. And so that's when the idea for Women's Travel Fest happened. So when I got to New York, I had like an insane amount of energy and sort of momentum that was building. So I came to New York with a very specific purpose. And I
Do you mean personal energy, or do you mean just
professional, career-wise? Like, I came to New York to dominate. Like, I went specifically to attack and to, you know what I mean? And I was like, I'm ready. Like, I'm going to crush this. I was just out of a fresh breakup. It was really rough. And I was sort of at the point where I was like, I was 23. So I was like, that's it. This is my focus. I'm going to follow this trail as long as I can. And I made some very specific goals involving the travel industry and New York City. And I within 2 months of arriving, I was speaking at conferences, I was meeting editors, I was living this kind of life that I had always really wanted to live, right? When I was looking outside of the travel industry, wanting to be in. Then Women's Travel Fest started about 9 or 10 months later. The very first one was in 2014, in March of 2014 in New York. And it was a one-day event. But it totally catapulted everything for me because it grew so quickly. And, you know, it went from just an idea to a woman taking a chance on me and offering me the most stunning venue I've ever seen.
Was that the church?
The church,
Yeah,
Angel
yeah.
Orensson's, yep. And she made that possible because she liked the idea and she worked with me on my tiny budget, at the time. And then Samantha Brown came on as keynote, and then Expedia came on as our platinum sponsor, and everything got so big so fast. And so that was kind of my New York lifestyle, was like building, and crushing. And that's kind of like what I feel like I started to base my self-worth on, almost, in a sense. Like, you know, how many times can I be written about? How many things can I create? What can I keep doing? And then at some point, I just got so exhausted with trying to keep up with myself, after 6.5 years. But, and there's another piece to this puzzle, which is when I started in the travel industry, before my businesses really grew legs, I was bartending. And I was bartending in New York. So I was bartending 4 nights a week, working until 4, 5 in the morning, and then trying to schedule interviews and trying to be at parties and network and be with my friends that were in the travel space. And so... yeah. So for a long time, it was just hustle. And
Were you having fun doing it?
I think I was. Yeah. I totally was. At first, it was new and it was exciting and it was New York City, right? And I was making waves there. And I think New York City is kind of a place that rewards the bold, right? So if you go there with intention and you really have a mission, it's easy to meet people.
Because there's enough opportunity and there are enough people.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And
so if you've got the energy for it, then it's just waiting for you.
Exactly. And the travel industry is not that big. And all of the writers and editors and decision makers that I wanted to meet were in New York. And there's maybe 200-300 of us. So, it was pretty easy to kind of like throw myself in. And I got very lucky because I had been introduced to a couple of people who were already in the industry that I was on press trips with before I was even doing anything. And so, those relationships were really important to me and still are. And so I think people in New York help one another, right? Or good people help good people. That's kind of my philosophy. And so they helped me and I helped them. And, Yeah. And so at the end of my time in New York, and it was great, but then I started to find that I was doing the same thing all the time. And I started to feel a little overwhelmed by the amount of energy that exists in that city. And
What do you mean doing the same things?
Like going to the same places, right?
Okay,
Going
okay.
to the same places, like take the train to work, take the train home, take the train to work, take the train home. And I'm, take the train to Soho, take the train home. And I've just kind of felt like I'm in one of the biggest cities of the world and I'm doing the same thing all the time. And also, like, it's expensive. And so some days I wouldn't even leave my apartment. And then I would feel so closed in. And I think it just, in the end of it, I was like, I'm ready for a different lifestyle.
Do you think that happens to a lot of people in New York?
Yeah, totally. And I think there are some people who really can forever thrive on that sort of energy. I know that it certainly fueled me in my first 3-4 years there. And it was around year 3 that I was like, I think I'm ready to move on, right?
I think we had elections right around that time too. Because I remember seeing, you're like, I'm done.
Horrible.
I'm out of
That was
here.
awful.
Yeah.
I was in Portugal for that. And I was like, I'm not even going to come back. And then my grandfather passed, so I had to. But, you get stuck, right? It's so easy to become complacent in wherever you are, right? And just to say like, well, my rent is affordable. I'm never going to find another apartment that's affordable, so I guess I shouldn't move. I have a job that pays me. I guess I shouldn't leave it. And so,
Do you think it's complacency or fear or combination of both?
For me, it was fear. But it was also complacency. It was being comfortable, but knowing there was something else out there for me, and knowing, like, being on the monkey bars, right? It's like, you have to just close your eyes and reach for the next bar. But doing that means risking everything. And what if you fall? What if you fail? And so I kind of was in that place for so long, really longer than
Years, you're saying.
Years, yeah, longer than I wanted, than I'm proud to admit. And it was some of my best friends who were like, what are you doing? You can do this. Like, you need to just change this. If you're not happy, just change it. And so it finally, and it took me forever, because bartending is great money. And I was managing a bar and it was great. And my owners helped me. They were so supportive of me traveling, and that was great. And it just took me a really long time to be like, if I don't double down on myself and invest in my own companies, then they're always going to be hobbies. Because if the bills are always paid, then there's no incentive to push. And that's when everything changed, really. I mean, everything changed.
Was it making the decision, or was it the move that changed everything?
It was making the decision first, putting in my notice for the job that I had outgrown. And then it was a series of events that led me to where I am now, right? And I think I've heard this from a lot of people who've made big leaps in life. Like, sometimes when you make these leaps, like, everything just falls apart. It does. At that point, I was in a really serious relationship, and I was super excited about it. And everything was moving in the right direction. I was getting ready to leave New York, potentially to relocate for this person to the West Coast. And then that relationship just combusted, like literally combusted. And on that same weekend, my grandmother passed. I mean, it was like a series of crazy things. And I think that happens a lot. And it's like the universe testing you. Like, you really going to keep going? You really going to keep going? But yeah, I was really going to keep going. And so I sat, I spent probably a solid week crying, just being like, what have I done? I'm so silly. And then I got up and I said, that's it. And that was August. I ended up moving in March, right after Travel Fest. So I stayed through that extra 6-7 months. And then I had made the choice to move. I didn't know where I was moving to. And then a friend of mine who helps authors write books offered me a place to stay in Portland. And I was like, sure, why not?
Had you been here before?
Once. Yeah, once. And I remember really liking it. And I was like, yeah, it could have been anywhere, though. It could have been Baltimore. It could have been, Cleveland. Like, I would have gone anywhere because I just needed to go somewhere.
So you packed up everything in New York?
Packed up everything.
Small studio. It's not like you had a big house. Nobody has a big house.
No,
in New York.
I shared an apartment with 2 other people. So I didn't have that much stuff, and I left in such a hurry. I remember just being so totally expelled by my time there that I left my toothbrush behind. I left all these things behind. I was like, forget it.
You're done.
Who cares? We got to go.
New start.
It's time to leave.
Yeah. Totally new start.
And I drove to Virginia, met up with my sister and my father, and then my father drove me all the way across the country, which in and of itself was an interesting experience because we had never really spent that much time as adults together. And also, there was no radio, and also he brought 4 country western CDs.
Oh, jeez. So was that a good trip?
It was, I mean, looking back on it, yeah, it was great. But it's just, it's like this weird thing that happens when you become a grown-up, right? And you look at your parents differently, and you're like, do you even know me as the adult that I am now?
Did he?
I don't, sometimes. I mean, you know, I still think, like, he was talking on the phone with a friend when we were driving, and he's like, oh, you know, Kelly, she types on the computer. And I said, do you know what I do for a job?
That was his description of your work.
I'm like, it's part of it, sure.
Yeah.
But like, and he's like, well, what do you do? I'm like, I own a tour company. I own a conference. I own a guidebook company. So, you know, and even still, he'll tell me to get a job. He'll be like, well, you should go get a job at the Portland newspaper. I'm like, Dad, I have 6 jobs. I am so busy and self-sufficient. And that didn't happen. My companies didn't make enough money to support me until I allowed them to support me, till I created the space for them to support me.
Which meant
leaving my other source of income.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it is really great. I know they talk about side hustles, right? Where you have a hobby or you have something that you might transition your hobby or your side hustle into a job. But when you have that safety net, sometimes you don't make the leap. You don't have that. You know, for me, like when I first started running tours early on, like it was super easy in the beginning. Like this is how I think all of life works. The first time you make a recipe, it's perfect. The next time you make it, it's like, what the hell happened in the kitchen? Like, I don't know what happened. And I think you take your eyes off of the ball for a moment and that recipe the second time around doesn't work. And I think it's that same way with projects. It's like the first tour I ran, I was like, oh my God, that was the easiest thing in the world to do and to sell. The next one, I'm like, why isn't anybody signing up? Because you have first adopters, right? And those people jump on board and then you have to work toward it. But it's that
first leap.
Yeah, it's that first leap. And then also when you have something to fall back on, when you've got that other job or other source of income, you don't have that moment of desperation. And when you have that moment of desperation, and like for me, it would be for tour number 3 or recipe number 3, third time I've tried it, then you really focus on it.
Yeah. I think I stayed suspended in limbo for a really long time. And I think part of that was my own fear of doing something bigger, of being bigger, because I felt like at that point in time, and I still live my life as a very public person, right? Like, I think I'm pretty accessible. I wear it all on my shoulder, and I don't really hide my struggles. But I started to feel like, am I becoming too visible? And if I create something bigger, is it too big? And that's fear. That's a total lie that we tell ourselves that holds us back from our potential.
You mean like exposing yourself?
Stepping into what is laid out for you, what you want, and like, how do I phrase this? Stepping into a bigger life when you know you want a bigger life, but you are creating it, and then the reality of what that feels like is terrifying, because it can be like, for me, it's like I kept creating things and they would get bigger and bigger. So, and which is I'm so lucky, right? And I think a lot of things that I was doing at the time were just good timing. Like when I started Women's Travel Fest, there was no women's travel space. We didn't talk about how men and women travel differently. I mean, I'm sure you can relate with your tours. Like, it wasn't a thing. And now it's such a thing.
Right.
And I'm so thankful for that, right? Because we have the opportunity to be first to the table because we were doing it before it was a thing.
And also, like with your sponsorships and stuff, I think now you might have an easier time getting sponsors because you're so well established. But at the time, I think I'm making a complete observation here. It's like just based on my work with sponsors, it's like there was a sweet spot early on with travel blogging where you could get money to actually do things. And now it's like everybody's doing it. So the money has kind of gone away. So it's just more difficult. But, when you're established, when you had years and years behind you of success,
Yeah.
then it becomes a little bit easier. But I think your timing was great for sure.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that came not from me looking at the market and being like, ooh, how can I make money here? It's really just like, I am traveling solo. There are a lot of things that people aren't telling me, guidebooks aren't telling me, companies aren't telling me, that my girlfriends are telling me. And like the way that we experience the world as women is different than the way that men experience it. And so then that's how Go Girl Guide started, the guidebooks. And then I was traveling to New York, doing this road trip, and I was talking to women about traveling, and they would come with their grandchildren and take me out to dinner, and they want to talk for hours about their experiences and how they can do things more safely and what I know that they need to know and things like that. And that kind of electricity really propelled me. And so that's when I thought, what if we did this in a bigger way, right? What if Travel Fest was a thing? And then when it happened, it was just like...
So describe what Women's Travel Fest is.
Sure. Oh, yeah, of course. So Women's Travel Fest is a 3-day event aimed at celebrating, inspiring, and connecting women who travel. And we are a consumer event. We are the world's largest consumer conference for women who travel. And that's really exciting. So it's not always so much about like how to build a blog, how to make money, that kind of stuff. It's more like, here's how you get to Antarctica.
Right.
Here are some
practical
tips for New Zealand. Yeah. So that means that people who come, there's really no other objective than they want to talk about traveling. And a lot of times I find that our audience are women who don't necessarily have a built-in travel community, right? Like they have families, they have responsibilities, and not everyone in their life is supporting these choices to go out and see the world. So you get this kind of like feverish excitement where everyone is like, oh, I'm so excited. I just want to tell you I want to hear about Thailand. I want to know, and it's awesome. And that stays consistent for 3 full days. And I'm so thankful for that because, I'm a team of one. I produced this entire event by myself. And so that like in the 6 months that I'm doing that, like that kind of energy sustains me and it makes it all worth it. And yeah, you're right. In terms of sponsorship, I would say only now in year 7, maybe last year too, did we start, like I've never done sponsor outreach because I hate it. I hate asking people for money. I really do. So I would just let them come to me. And at this point, we are 6 or 7 weeks out from the next Women's Travel Fest, and we're totally sold out of vendor spaces. We're totally sold out of bronze sponsorships. We have a platinum sponsor who's returning. So it's a lot easier than it used to be. But
who is your platinum sponsor?
Uber.
We should at least give them a shout out
Uber.
for it. Yeah.
They'll return.
And this is in New York.
This is in New York.
Okay, so now you're working remotely, getting it all together. And I know that at one time you were moving the WTFs around.
Yep.
Are they still only in New York, or are you moving them around?
That is the $1 million
Portland,
question.
have Portland,
No,
have Portland.
I think that I actually will bring it to Portland in 2021. Or I'm
Right
thinking about starting a Women's Travel Fest West. So doing like keeping it in East and then doing it, smaller, much smaller here. But I don't really know. I go back and forth on that a lot. Like whether
you can support it.
Yeah. Does it dilute an event if it happens twice a year instead of once a year? It's a special thing, and I don't want to change that energy too much. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, pulling for the West Coast.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are.
Well, good. Yeah. So now this will be your 7th year in that.
Yeah, March 6th to the 8th.
How many people do you have, consumers who attend?
400.
Wow.
Yeah, it's grown. I mean, the first year I think we had 200, and then it stayed between 2 and 3 for a while. Now, I mean, we've sold almost 300 just now, so it's getting bigger. And I love it for what it is. And I have a lot of people come to me who are like, you should make this into a 2,000 person event. It should be like a TED Talk. And I don't know that I want it to be that. I don't know. I struggle with that. It's like, for me, it's not about the money. It's about the community. And I don't want to change things and hurt the community or the experience of the community.
Right.
So.
Yeah. That's how I feel about my tours. I know that so Damesly is your tour company, and you've stepped back a little bit from that. You're still running, the tours are still going, but you're not leading them. But I have that same thing. I love leading my tours. I'm sure you do too, but you've got Women's Travel Fest to run. And I know that over the years, I've kind of thought about like, what if somebody else were leading the tours? But I get so much energy, around it. I just get so much from it that I don't want to let it go. And I'm sure it's the same thing. It's like you don't want to mess with what works. And just because it means it's bigger or there's more money involved, it's not going to feed your soul, right? And I'm sure that's how you're looking at it. It's like, if I grow it, then it's not going to feed my soul.
Yeah. I mean, I wrestle with this too, right? Because so at this point, I'm fully self-employed from Go Girl Guides, Women's Travel Fest, and Damesly, which is awesome. I desperately need help, but I am scared to hire because of all of these things that we just mentioned. Like, I don't want to dilute things. I don't want to confuse things. But at the same time, things have to grow. And then because I guess because that's the nature of creation, right? You have to keep building. I feel like I have to keep building.
Okay, because I don't feel that way.
I do. I don't know. I just can't stop.
Yeah. I have to innovate and change, but I don't feel like it has to get bigger.
I do. I want Damesly to grow because I think it's such an awesome company. I think what we're doing really changes lives. I've seen it, and that is so important for me to continue to do because really everything started because I started to recognize my own personal strength and power that came from traveling, and I wanted to help other women experience that. So talking about traveling at Women's Travel Fest is great, but taking women traveling is really amazing. And like, I have seen such actual life transformations happen on these tours.
Yeah,
and that is so rewarding. So I will always keep them as like small group, 8 to 10 probably. But the business is growing and I am getting tired, quite frankly. So I'm getting tired of traveling and I'm looking at my life now at 33, 10 years into all of this. And I'm thinking, what else do I want in my life? Do I want to have a family? Do I want to have a relationship? And all of these things, I mean, these were sacrifices that I made in traveling all the time, It's a balance. It's a give and take. And I'm so thankful for my life and all of the blessings that it's given me and shown me the entire world and such incredible people. But it hasn't come without a price. And so now, and moving to the West Coast, getting out of the stream of things, the frenzy of things, has really given me the opportunity to slow it down and like look at my life and my priorities and think, business is great, but what else is there? What else do I want? And I'm starting to get tired of traveling, and I never thought I would say that. But that's when you bring on help. So I have hired some really awesome tour leaders, and they're kicking butt. Like the last tour, which just ran to Cuba, all of the women on that tour emailed me saying, like, what a fantastic time they had, how great the leader was, and that makes me really happy. So what changed for you when you moved to Portland? I think I just finally got to take a deep breath, actually, like.
And do you think that you could have done that in New York?
No.
So it's just like the environment is such that it's just not possible there.
It's just not possible there. And, I have to tell you the story because it's really funny, first of all. So when I first got to Portland and I moved into the cutest house ever, I freaked out. I completely freaked out. I started crying. I was like, what have you done? No one's going to care about you anymore. Your businesses won't mean anything. The press won't write about you. And like, I literally freaked out. And my friend that I was renting the place from, she came over, she took me on a walk. And then I started to be mad at myself because I was like, that's all your ego. That is 100% ego. Like, who cares if nobody writes about you anymore? Who cares if nothing works anymore? Who cares? And so we were walking through this park and people here, and this is such a weird thing. I was crossing a 4-lane street. And before I even got to the middle, people were stopping to let me cross. And I remember thinking, people in New York would never let you cross the street.
You mean cars?
Yes.
Yeah.
People would never let you cross the street.
Mm-hmm.
And like, wow, people are so nice here. And, and everyone that I met was so nice.
But you also don't cross the street. You don't jaywalk and you don't cross the street against the light.
Yeah.
At least that's the way it is in Seattle.
No, I still have my New York tendencies. I'm always jaywalking. But people here are just like much more community focused. And so then I really got the chance to just kind of shed all that like built up sort of you have to create, you have to do kind of hustle sort of New York layer that I had been wearing. And I got the chance to go inward for a little bit and focus on my next priorities, which was writing this book that I'm writing and working on myself, healing some traumas that I had carried around since childhood that is really easy to sort of suppress when you're just like achieving. And that's been really great for me. So after that change happened, then it was like, what else do you want in your life? You know, if you could ask the universe for anything, what do you want your life to look like? And for me, it's not always about money. Like, I think I want a family. And so I have to sort of slow it down to allow other things to enter my life. So
A relationship.
Yeah. And I've lost a lot of relationships because I'm traveling all the time. You know, I met someone really great here in Portland, actually, right when I got here, and we couldn't last because I was gone all the time. And he's like, it's just too much. It's too much.
So even now you're traveling a lot.
I'm slowing way down. But yeah, I mean, all of fall I was gone. I was gone all of September, all of October, half of November, half of December.
Are you concerned that will compromise who you are at the core? Because travel is so important to you?
No, because I'm looking at traveling differently. Like, I feel like when I started, you know, I also didn't start traveling until after I graduated college. I always wanted to, but of course I grew up in Hawaii. It's very expensive, and we didn't have the money to study abroad.
Hard to get
very
off
expensive.
island.
So I didn't start traveling until 21, 22. And then it was like, I have to see the world. And I had this like angst within me. Like, I got to see it all. And now that I've seen so much of it, I am not feeling that same way. Like, I will always love to travel, and I will always travel throughout my life, but I don't feel this like, you gotta see the pyramids right now, like crazy like angst that I used to feel. So, and I think I'm just moving into different phases in life.
Let's go back and talk about those early travels for you. So grew up in Hawaii, went to school in Hawaii, and then wanted to take off. What was your first trip?
So I went to school and I went to college in Tucson at the University of Arizona. And my first trip was post-graduation to Fiji, New Zealand, and Australia. And I just completely...
And did you go by yourself?
I went with one of my best friends. And it was kind of like a graduation present, so to speak. Our parents bought us the flights, which was so sweet, but we had like no money like at all, and we made it work. You know,
but
we were
that's
backpacking.
Like don't you miss that?
Yes,
I mean,
I do.
I do miss that because I think back on my backpacking days, $2 a night in a Bangkok hotel, or Sydney hostel for $10, or I can stay for free if I clean. I'll do that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I definitely worked as a housekeeper in New Zealand and ate packets of flavored tuna fish in Australia when I had no money, like literally no money. Those were some great days, but things are great now too. So so we went to Fiji, New Zealand, Australia. And that's, once you start traveling, you start talking to other travelers and hearing where they've gone, and then it makes the world feel much smaller and more accessible. When we got to New Zealand, we met up with someone who was living there on a working holiday visa, and I was talking to him about that, and that inspired me so much that I went back home, sold everything I owned, and moved to New Zealand on a working holiday visa.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
No.
As an American? You could get a working holiday visa.
If you're under 30, for free.
Oh, darn.
For free through the government. So I was 22, maybe 21.
Were you in Auckland?
No. So I went to the South Island. I went first to Dunedin, and I was working as a housekeeper in exchange for free room board, and then they actually hired me. And then I moved to Queenstown, and I was working for a company that did Lord of the Rings tours.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it was like
fun.
The best. It was so much fun. Also so weird. Like, people would come in speaking Elvish to me and like spending $1,000 on sword replicas. But, whatever. To each their own. And it was so much fun. And I just lived in this really fun house with these people who had traveled far more than I had, and and they taught me how to snowboard, and I mean, it was just fun. And like, life didn't have to be complicated then, and it wasn't. And when I look at it now, it's like, that is just so much fun. And I remember my friend coming to visit, and she's being like, you can't, this is like Peter Pan land. You can't like live here forever. And I'm like, yes, I can.
How long were you there?
A year.
That's a long time.
Yeah, when my visa expired and it got cold, and I was like, I got to figure something else out. So went back to the States and got all my jobs again, bartending, writing, editing, was doing all these things. And then I was like, well, now what? I have all these jobs. I have this money. Now what am I going to do? And then one night, in the middle of the night, I had a dream that I was looking at guidebooks for women. And in my dream, I was going, oh, this is totally your calling. You should have done this. You're so dumb. Why didn't you do it? Somebody else did it. And then I remembered it midday through my 9-to-5 job, through my shift. And it hit me like an anvil. Then I started Googling, and I realized that nobody had done women's travel guidebooks in 2010, which I thought was ludicrous. And so with zero experience in writing guidebooks or how to create something like that, I quit my job and moved to Thailand for 4 months while we worked on my friend who went on that original trip with me. We went to Thailand and worked on what would become the first guidebook.
And what was the name of that?
Go Girl Guides, Thailand. Yeah.
Okay, just Thailand. So how many do you have in that series?
7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it just became one after the other. Guidebooks are so expensive, though, and they need to be updated constantly.
Yeah, I know.
It's
really tough. If you're destination specific, that's really difficult.
So difficult. And so we learned a lot. I learned a lot, and that got me into the industry, and then things grew from there. Things changed. Travel Fest came along, and I was like, hey, this is fun. This is a lot more fun than
So you were talking about your dad. Mm-hmm. What does your family, or what did your family think back then when you took off after college and did a trip?
I think they were like, hey, cool, yeah, go travel. And then when I started Travel Fest, and I have to say my family has come every year to Women's Travel Fest.
Oh, they have?
Every year. You've probably met them.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, every year they've come and they sit there and they love it. And I think, but even still, they don't totally understand like what it is I do.
Well, you know what? There's this weird thing, I think, that when we're really close to people, when it's family or the person we live with, or just like somebody who's really close, and you start to do something, there's almost a disbelief or a misunderstanding about what it is that you do. Somebody new coming in and saying, oh, this is Kelly Lewis, this is what she does. Then it's like, whoa, that's so cool. But the people who see you evolve, there's a different perspective. I don't know. I haven't analyzed it enough, but I know that it's there, that the people who are closest to you are, I don't think necessarily that they're being more critical, but I just think that because they have so much of your past in their memory, that it's really hard for them to see a shift.
Yeah. I mean, I think for a long time, my family just thought I was sort of flitting about the world. Like, ooh, there she goes. I don't know where she is now. She's always gone.
My family still thinks that.
Yeah, and I still think that they think that. I think, at one point I was in Bhutan or something, and I had called my mom, and she was like, I realized I have absolutely no idea where you are in the world. Like, no idea.
Get on Facebook, Mom.
And I'm like, yeah, I believe that. Because I'm just kind of out there doing it. And so now they're so used to it that they're like, I think they brag to their friends like, oh, Kelly, she saw a pink dolphin in the Amazon. Isn't that crazy? Like,
yeah. My sister-in-law called me the other day, and she goes, where are you? And I was like, I'm in the bathroom. I just got out of the shower. And she's like, no, I mean, like, where in the world are you? I'm like, I'm in Seattle. But it was really funny, our context. I'm like, I'm in the bathroom, because I thought maybe she heard the echo. And so, that she was saying like, where are you? It sounds like you're in a tunnel.
Yeah. My family's always like, oh, you're here.
Surprise. I know.
And that's, that's fine. They trust that I'm doing things. And I do think that now they sort of understand. They see, what I'm creating, and they're kind of like, yeah, if you can do it, do it. Like, just, go down that path. And it's also that I've never asked them for anything. So, when my back was against the wall, like, they know that I'm resourceful enough to get a bar job if I have to. Like, I can always figure it out. So.
And your friends, do you maintain like long-term friends?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like from Hawaii?
Yeah, actually, they fly out to help me with Women's Travel Fest every year. I have some really solid girlfriends. And some of them are here in Portland, which has been really fun to reconnect with them.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great. So, makes all the difference in life.
But I grew up in Hawaii in a house that was pretty abusive, with a stepfather who was pretty awful to me. And so I was always looking for a way out. And so my friends became so important to me, and they still are. Like, I have some of the best friends, and those relationships take a lot of work, and I spend a lot of work on them every week, calling in and checking in, and I love my friends. And so I think everything in life comes down to people, right? Who do you have behind you? Who's supporting you? Who do you know? How can they help each other? And that's really been the ethos of my life and my career and everything. It all comes down to people. So I spend a lot of time with the people that are very close to me.
Was your mom in the house too?
She was.
Mm-hmm. And you have siblings?
Yeah. Well, step siblings and half siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can we talk about this stuff?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that part of your wanting to kind of get out and see the world goes back to just wanting to escape what you went through?
And I think the overachieving also comes from that too.
In what way?
Which is why I'm writing this book, right? So I'm writing this book called Tell Her She Can't, which talks a bit about my story, but also talks about the stories of other women who've gone through adversity to achieve success and have used that as a fuel to kind of propel them forward. I used it as a fuel. And I just became determined to be actually, screw you. Watch me do it, And so with that kind of mentality, because I hated my stepfather so much and he was so terrible to me, and it was his whole objective in life was to wear me down and convince me that I would be nothing and exhaust me, right? And it was an all day, all night, throwing buckets of water on me in the middle of the night.
How old were you when he came into the house?
I was 2.
And your mom didn't stand up for you?
No, she didn't. Mm-hmm. And I think now as an adult, I think she carries some guilt about that, but I totally forgive her of it because I can understand how it would be difficult to have to manage her other children and pay her bills. And I think that she was always sort of afraid. What was she going to do? And he was good to her.
Are they still together?
He was good to them. They're finally getting divorced. Anyway, it was not a really great time for me growing up. And I had a lot of just a lot of breakdowns. And I the only thing that got me through it was being I'm going to be better than you ever were. I'm going to achieve more than you ever could, right? So I moved out of my childhood home 2 days after I graduated high school. And I moved all the way to Arizona just to get away, just to be free. And so from that really came that. And I hate to say that everything that I have done was because I was trying to get revenge on someone, but it really did propel me forward. Mm-hmm. And then once I started harnessing that, and I think that there was a conversation at one point in my life that my mom and I had when I was really young. I was probably 10. And she said to me, you have 2 options. You can let this completely destroy you and make life choices around that, or you can let this make you harder and stronger. And so I had no other, there wasn't another option. Of course, there's always another option. It could have been drugs. It could have been whatever.
Which is the path that a lot of people take.
Right.
And you've used it for good.
Yeah.
You've turned it around. So I think you were going to say a couple minutes ago maybe that maybe it wasn't the best thing that you're such an overachiever, but it could have gone the other way. You have used it for good.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing about it.
Yeah. And I think the idea for this book specifically kind of came to me because I really wish that I could have had something like that when I was younger, to be everybody goes through it at some point in time, and here's how they got out of it. Because now when I look at my life, my beautiful, rich in so many ways life that I've seen in the world, it's I had to pay a price in life. So I feel my childhood had to be terrible so that my adult life could be amazing, right? And now as an adult, it's my duty to help children or women specifically, who are stuck in these situations with men who are awful and they can't do anything about it. And so that's kind of where these new sorts of things have come up for me. And a lot of it did have to do with moving to the West Coast, to recentering. And then it's I got to deal with these things because they've been here all along, right? So now in my projects going forwards, it's less to me about traveling and achieving and all these things, and more about like, what can I do to heal myself? What can I do to heal others? How can I create more good in the world? You know, what experiences have I had that have led me here, and how can I help other people? You know, the thing is like, we all go through it at some point. There's death, there's loss, there's fires, we all go through it. It's in some capacity. There's abuse, there's neglect. I mean, in how you choose to handle your life going forward is entirely up to you. So,
well, there is that point of like, we all go through it. Like, I remember when Eat, Pray, Love came out, and I'm not a fan of the book. I read it, but I'm not a fan of the book. And part of that was because, she starts out, I think, lying on the bathroom floor, crying, throwing up in the toilet, and she's getting ready to get divorced. And I just thought, like, get over it.
Yeah.
Like, everybody goes through that. Like, you're being a drama queen kind of about it. And I said that to a friend of mine, and I was like, yeah, I didn't really like the book because we all go through that. And my friend said, exactly. We all go through that.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so wildly popular, because so many people could relate to that. But I think for the purposes of writing a book, and a wildly popular book, that makes sense, like having that arc and that information. But I think that I don't know that what she did in that book was for good. Like, like what you're talking about is showing. Hers was her story and her memoir, but what you're doing is you're showing there's a way out.
Yeah.
That this shit happens to everybody.
Everyone.
And there's a way through it.
Yeah. And I'm not going to lie to you, writing this book has been one of the biggest challenges I have ever taken on, because I am constantly faced with a voice that says, who cares? Who cares about your life? Who cares? Other people are going through bigger things. Like who's going to care about your story? And so now that I'm incorporating other stories into it, because that's a part of it too, is like, yeah, well, maybe that's the whole point, is to show that it's not just me. To show that people have gone through everything.
Well, that's the whole thing with the podcast too. Like I was describing to you, it's like I can tell people that, I've run a marathon. I ran my first marathon at 50. I can say this and I'm an anomaly, but that people will point to me and say, well, that's just Beth, right? But when we hear other people's stories, then we realize like, oh, it hasn't been like Kelly didn't have the most ideal background. Like I'll have people tell me like, oh, you didn't grow up with money and, with privilege and a good college education. I'm like, no, are you kidding me? Like we struggled, and that is
totally,
you come out the other end.
Yeah. And
the thing about writing a book too, it's not just, I mean, for me, because I'm working on a book as well. I've been working on it for years, and
so
it's
hard.
Like, it is. I had to just kind of put it away for the past few months just to focus on business, because it's really hard to do both, because I don't know where to put my time. So I stare out the window.
Yeah.
Like, where do I start?
Oh, totally.
But it's also really painful.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about, and I have my own story, not too dissimilar to yours, not as rough, but when you start putting that to paper, it's really painful.
Super
painful. And then it's not just the hour or the 2 hours that you put into it in the morning. Then when you go for a walk, it's still there, or when you're driving, it's still there. You're still dealing with it.
Yeah. And it's like, do I want to take these ugly bits of myself and put them on a page for other people to read and dissect and tell me it's not ugly enough, or tell me whatever they think, And then I also feel some kind of a guilt, right? Because it's like, I don't want to hurt my mother. I don't want her to feel that I feel that she abandoned me or let me stay in this, even though she did, right? I forgive her for that. And so there's a lot of things that's like, it's difficult. And it's also difficult for me to say, hey, lady, I don't really know. Tell me your deepest and darkest pains so that I can then help other women to get out of them. Like that's hard too. So nothing about it is easy. And when I get super busy, it's the first thing that goes from my schedule. I'm like, well, looks like writing's out today. Like it's so easy to say no to things like that. And it's the same fear that I felt before I quit bartending and went all in on everything that I do. It's that same fear of like, this is so big. It's so big, and it feels so important, and it feels so, you know what I mean? And it's like, what if it comes out and it's crap? And it won't, of course. Your logical brain is like, it's going to be fine. But it's scary to do big things.
But so what if it is?
So
it's
what
still,
if it is?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I just read this, there's this book by Yvonne Chouinard, and it's called something like the founder of Patagonia. It's like something like Let My People Climb or something like that. I can't remember. It is so poorly written. It's almost an inspiration to me because I'm like, look, I know everybody knows who he is, and so he's got that going for him. But he published a book, and I don't see everybody complaining about it. So
Totally.
I know I can write a better book than that.
Yeah, I've read books that are on the bestseller list, and I'm like, this is dribble. Like,
isn't that 50 Shades of whatever?
Yes, 50 Shades of garbage.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but it's something that I am passionate about, and I think it goes back to the bigger purpose, right? It's not about money or creation, although I would love for it to be a bestseller. It's just like I have this thing in me that needs to get out, and this idea that won't let me sleep in the middle of the night, and so it keeps coming to me. Did you ever, so on the topic of Elizabeth Gilbert, did you ever read Big Magic?
No, I haven't.
I read that book, and she has this really interesting theory that when you have big ideas, it's your duty to be the vessel that those ideas come through. And if you sleep on that, those ideas will eventually leave you and go to someone else so that they can be born. Like the idea is trying to be born, right? So it's like, do you want to be the one that brings it to life, or do you want other people to bring it to life? So this, I just can't, it's like gnawing at me.
Well, it's like the Go Girl guides, right?
Yep.
It's like, because I had that same thing when my book Wanderlust and Lipstick: The Essential Guide for Women Traveling Solo came out. It was the same thing. It was like, oh, there's other women who've written books on traveling alone. What do I have to say? And then I just realized, well, I have a different voice, that's just different. And those books had come out, a long time ago, and things have changed and that sort of thing. So it's
and that little voice is fear. I was like, oh, I don't know. How are you going to stand out? And like, I'm trying to consciously tune into those moments where I'm like, I am scared out of my brain and push myself through it, because it's like, good. Should be. If you're doing something that's important to you, you should be scared, because it's scary.
Well, what is that process to push through the fear?
For me, it's sitting down. Usually I find that I am resisting something. If it's writing, I'm cleaning the house, which is already clean. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm going to do laundry again. Like, I'm trying to do anything but what I know I need to do.
I know I always say I get more done around the house when I'm sitting down to write the book than everything. It's great.
Right. Because it's scary. So then I have to stop and be like, okay, you don't have any dishes that are dirty. You need to stop. And what are you fighting? Like, why won't you sit down and write this thing? What does it feel like? And then I listen and I say, it's too much. And so I say, okay, well, how can I attack it in a way that's smaller? What if I just wrote this one story? What if I just wrote this one page? And a lot of this creation part, which is difficult, is that I don't have a super firm outline. Like, I'm intentionally letting it be flexible so that I can build on it, because everything's going to change anyway. So
do you journal this out, or do you just internalize it mentally?
I actually started this practice that I'm really obsessed with, that I learned about in a book called The Artist's Way, called Morning Pages.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I'm doing morning pages every morning just for my own sanity, and I sleep better than I ever have, I have to say. Like, I do get a lot of that stuff out, but that's not the book. That's just me journaling, right? It's just me putting pen to paper. And I think, I have to say in New York, even though I grew up writing poems and journaling, and that was always like my safe place from everything that was happening in my house. I mean, I would lock myself in the bathroom and just write poems on the floor forever. I stopped writing in New York. I totally became focused on like everything else, and I let go of that creative part of myself. And so touching back into that is scary, because it's like, well, what if it's gone? What if you can't write anymore? What if your poems are crap now? Like, but who cares?
Right. Well, the whole idea behind the morning pages is just to sit down and write 3 pages, no matter what and just get it out.
And like this morning, it was about like this challenge that I'm doing at the gym, and like how many carbs I've eaten today, and like stupid stuff. It really doesn't matter. It's not like I'm not professing my soul, but I am moving my hand along a page, and that in itself really has been powerful. So I think writing a book is like, it's kind of like running a marathon. Like it goes up and down and up and down, and you get really excited about it, and then you get totally over it. And, you just have to like see it. You just have to finish it because it's asking to be finished. That's how I'm looking at it. But I don't know.
So your focuses are Women's Travel Fest and the book.
And then Damesly.
And Damesly.
Yeah. Yeah. So Women's Travel Fest is in 6 weeks. So it's kind of crazy right now, but I'm feeling really good about it because this is year 7. So it gets easier and easier. And
3 days. That's a lot. That's a lot of programming.
It sure is. Yeah. It's a lot, but it's so much fun. And I'm really excited for it. And it's been hard, logistically being like, where do I send all these boxes now that I don't live in New York? Like, how do I figure all these things out? But I turned to my community and I asked them, like, hey, can I pay someone to store these boxes for me? Does anyone have space? And I found someone. So Travel Fest is my number one. And then the book, I try to sit down at least an hour or 2 hours a day. Sometimes that means 5 pages. Sometimes that means a page. I mean, it just totally depends. Sometimes it means 0. Sometimes I don't get there. And then Damesly. But Damesly is in such a place right now that I really put so much work into it in the last 6 to 8 months, like redoing the website, answering all these questions that I was getting emails about so that it's like apparently clear, hiring the right tour guides, creating tours that I'm super proud of. So I feel like Damesly is kind of moving, it's like its own machine. And so it's good. I mean, that means that I have flexibility in my schedule to write a book. But will I do it is the question. Because it's like, but, or I could cook dinner and the housewives are on and, it's like stupid stuff.
Are you spending a lot of time on your laptop? Like, is that, so that's like you have to sit down and you're answering emails and you're doing logistics and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's hard because if I start answering emails, I sometimes can't get out, especially with Travel Fest, because it's like you send one, you get 2 back.
Right, I know.
It's like I can't even take a shower without getting emails. And they're all important emails. It's not like everything needs attention because this show has to happen. So I'm really trying to just go. Lately, I've been going to the coffee shop near my house and just not getting on the Wi-Fi and just sitting down and writing.
Isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. You know what? I love the days when I could take a flight and I wasn't tempted by the Wi-Fi because I could clear out my inbox. Mm-hmm. Maybe not inbox 0, but I could start just clearing out. And like you said, you send one email and you get 2 back. Yep. And so if I could just like be on a flight and then just clear out a bunch of emails and then at least they wouldn't be sent until I landed, but I would feel like so proud of myself. And now with Wi-Fi, I send it and then I do get 2 back.
Yeah, I know.
It's like I'm just creating more work for myself.
It's hard. I think what the turning point for me has been is really in creating a pretty tight schedule, daily schedule. So like I'll wake up, I'll write my morning pages, I'll go to the gym, then I'll come home, I'll eat breakfast, I'll finish some emails, and then I'll write for an hour or 2 hours. And then I'll go back to writing emails. So that means that sometimes I don't stop until like 8 or 9 p.m. And maybe, maybe even 10. Maybe I wake up in the middle of the night. It's like, I don't ever feel like I'm totally stopping, but I'm creating enough structure in my day that I feel like everything's getting done. And I have outlets like working out to release that kind of energy. The tricky part is when you start adding other people to that, right? So like I'm newly dating this guy. He is wonderful, but it's like, where do I fit you? Where do I fit you? Because if I give you tonight, then tomorrow I have a meeting at 7. I don't know how that's going to work. And every day is different. So
I have 2 questions around that, around your kind of the structure of your day, because you work from home, as do I, and I'm constantly being asked, or like people are kind of giving me feedback of like, I could never work at home. I have to go into an office. I have to be out of the house.
Love working at home.
Yeah. So how do you make that happen? Like, I understand it for myself. I understand the process. But how do you stay motivated to be so structured?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a need, right? Like, I have no choice. Like, this show has to happen. I have things that I have to do. But it's also, I don't know. I think when I'm working, I'm so focused on working that even if I have like SVU playing in the background or like some kind of noise, because sometimes I need noise behind me. I'm still so focused on what I'm doing, then I just get it all done. But I do think it comes back to that, like that drive, that innate drive that I have to like create. And that sort of kicks into gear when I pull open my emails and I have to, you just have to knock them out. I love having a flexible schedule, and I love being able to say, like, I'm going to work all day today until 6, and then I'm going to go to a cocktail hour, or I'm going to work until 9 tonight because tomorrow I'm going to go up to Mount Hood and go snowboarding. Like, I love being able to have the flexibility.
Or you're going to go to the gym at 10 o'clock.
Or I'm going to go to the gym at 10. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have a class that I try to hit at 8:20 in the morning. So I get up at 7, and that's kind of where my day starts. I know there are people who get up at like 5.
Mm-hmm. I get up at 5.
Yeah, good for you. I wish I could get up that early, but I just can't. So sometimes I work a little bit later, but I'm so thankful for the flexibility to do that, because I do remember working a 9 to 5 and just coming home with my eyes like, bleary and bloodshot and not having that time to be creative. So
have you always been like that? Like you've been self-motivated?
Yeah.
And do you think that all ties into the whole kind of overachiever?
I do. I think I had to be self-motivated because nobody came to rescue me. Nobody was going to come to rescue me since I was little. So it was like, you are going to start working. I got my first job when I was 14, I was always working because nobody was going to help me. And so that's where that comes from, is like, you're going to get it done because you don't have a choice. And I'm thankful for that. I really am, because I meet some people who don't have that same drive, and they talk to someone like me, and it does make me feel a little bit guilty sometimes, because they're like, oh, I wish I could just get up and do things. And it's like, well, you can, right? You can.
Yeah. I know people say, oh, I wish I had your life. And I think, okay, come shadow me, come look at what my day is like.
But there's a trade-off in that too. Like in running marathons, there are projects you say no to because you know that you're going to be training.
Right.
There are blisters on your feet that are bloody. I would never keep running, but that's me. We're different people. And like, there are things that you sacrifice to achieve goals that you want. That's just the way life goes. So
speaking of the blister, and because I know that you saw the post when I was running Epic 5 in November. I had posted something. I think it was my neighbor who I run with, so he knows me. And he's a runner, right? So he knows the reality of running. And I think it was him that said something like, "So what's really happening? Like, what's the gruesome part of it?" And so I posted a photo of me lying down on a couch. John had given me a bag of ice to put on my head because he was concerned. The air conditioning wasn't great in the Airbnb that we had. So he was like, I want you to cool down. I had this, it's called an e-stim device, which shoots like little buzzy electrodes into whatever body part on these gel pads. I had them on my feet, and I had this terrible blister that I was attending to every day. And so I posted something about that, and people want the reality of it. And then when you get real, they're like, "Oh, I told you, I'm so worried about you. I told you that was going to be an issue." They like project their own fear onto you. And I know this is a segue from the bigger picture of what we were talking about, but I think it goes into that, like what you and I have experienced over the years as travelers, as solo independent women running companies and traveling solo. How do you deal with that kind of feedback? Because I'm sure you haven't explicitly said it, but I'm sure you get that kind of feedback from people too.
Totally.
How do you deal with that?
Oh God, it's so hard, right? It's really hard when people say things to you like, "Oh, I wish I could do that." My least favorite is, "Oh, it must be nice," or "How lucky." Like nothing that I have achieved or like fought for. And, and then I go, well, why do I have to justify? Like, why do I have to show you all my bloody bruised bits for you to understand that I'm working on something that's bigger than just me and it's important to me?
And that it's not just luck.
Yeah, and it's not just luck, right? And I think like showing the blister, that photo, I was like, oh my God, she is really in it. She is going for it. And that's great. We should show that. Like, we should show the struggle of what it takes. And I think, from the outside in, it's really easy for people to sort of justify why they aren't living a bigger life that they know they want to live. And there are some people who are happy in their life doing exactly what they do, and that's awesome. There are other people people like me, maybe people like you, who see other people achieving and they go, I want to do that. I have a bigger purpose. I'm made for more than this. And those people are the ones who will say to people who are achieving on their own path, like, they'll throw the salt, right? Like, oh, well, it must be nice. Oh, if only I could work from home, then I could probably get this done too. Or, you know, if I could afford a gym membership, then I would work out too. Whatever it is.
I'd be in better shape. Or,
yeah, you can actually, though. Like, so the thing is like, I try not to let people stay in that space too much. So when they say it to me verbally, it's easy for me to be like, so then why aren't you? So then what are you doing? What are you doing? You want to go travel? Why aren't you booking a flight? Book a flight right now. Pull out your credit card, book a flight for 6 weeks, and then figure out how you're going to pay for it in that 6 weeks. You have to take action. It's the harder part for me are people online. And like, I've certainly had people throw dirt at me or seen something that I have said and misinterpreted it, and that's become a bigger thing. And it's so easy on the internet these days to like,
because they're anonymous comments, right?
Ish, right? You know who it's coming from, but like they can say whatever they want and keep going, and those things really hurt sometimes. So, you know, I guess it's like you just have to turn inward and keep going, like keep focusing on your own picture and be like, yeah, well, I'm going to actually keep going. So I have blisters, and when I finish and when I don't break my leg, you know, I expect for you to be like moved by that in some capacity, whether they tell you that or not.
It's
Watching
almost like
someone succeed is hard when you want to also succeed.
And it's almost like people are waiting for you to fail.
Totally.
Which
Totally.
I don't.
I get it all the time. I mean, all the time. I just announced a speaker for Women's Travel Fest who is an awesome woman named Sarah. She was born without the lower half of her right arm, which I think is really important. And she's hiking Kilimanjaro. And I wanted to announce her. She was on The Bachelor. As a speaker, because I was like, cool, travel is for everyone. This is a great way for us to show that travel is for everyone, however you're born, wherever you come from. And I still got comments like, well, she's so young. Why don't you have older people speaking? You know, am I wasting my money going to something like this with younger people speaking? And it's like, you can't win. You can't win. And sometimes it feels like that. Like, I'm super, super, super focused on diversity from a logistical scheduling standpoint, because it's important to me that everyone feels represented at Travel Fest, and that we showcase that travel isn't just for the rich or the white or the able-bodied. Like, travel is for everyone. It depends on your priorities and how you live your life, whether or not you achieve those dreams. So I'm super focused on that, like, as a human being. And it's really important to me that we tell different stories. But I swear, it's like, I will still get emails being like, you don't have any Asian American women on your lineup this year. And it's like, what do I have to do? I only have 30 people that can speak at one point in time. And so you just have to do the best that you can do and let the naysayers be, or use it as motivation to do better next year. And it's like, okay, well, maybe next year we'll look at that area that we're not looking at.
Yeah. And can you send me some names too?
Totally.
Because sometimes it's just difficult. Like I do have a difficult time finding women of color to be on the podcast, and it is not for lack of trying. It's because I've reached out to so many, and a lot of them don't want to talk. I mean, a lot of white women don't want to talk either, but I've got a list of probably 200 women who are kind of on my target list, and there's a healthy proportion of those who are women of color, and it's oftentimes just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Like, for whatever reason. And like I said, it's not just women of color. It's white women too who've turned me down.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, when I look at Travel Fest, Women's Travel Fest, and the progression of it from 2014, in 2014, there weren't a lot of women really like leading the travel space. There were not a lot of women of color. At this point, like women like Onika Raymond, who I love and respect so dearly, was still a teacher in Hong Kong, like didn't even have a travel blog. Like they were, and we still, from the beginning, we're really, really focused on diversity. But, we've changed a lot. The industry has changed a lot. And that's created a lot of voices and a lot of stories from different backgrounds. And I'm so thankful for that, because in 2014, I remember it being really difficult, much more difficult than it is now. But at the end of the day, the moral of all of these stories is like, people will always
troll on you.
People will always troll on you. People will always root for you to fail. We love it as a people. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Maybe it's like tabloid news, right? Because you look at that, you almost feel better. I don't, but I can see how tabloids are successful, because you see somebody on the front cover and of course, Jennifer Aniston. No, she doesn't have it all.
Yeah,
you know, she's like going through another struggle.
She's got cellulite. Oh my God.
Yeah,
I mean,
she has a pimple.
People will always try to do that to you. And that's the whole story of this book, and kind of the whole story of my life and life in general, is like, you keep going because it's important to you and it does good. If you focus on the good that you're putting out in the world, the goals that you have to accomplish, like, that's really all that matters, and you have to just tune all that other BS out, because it's just noise. And so that's what I found. And I think also, like, taking people along on your journey, like posting photos like that, posting photos of your ice on your head and your bloody bandaged foot, really makes it relatable. I know when I first moved to New York and I was bartending and doing travel stuff, I was like embarrassed to tell people I was bartending. I wanted them to all think that I was just successful in travel. And then eventually I was like, this is not authentic. Like, this is not really what it is, and how you get from A to B. And so when I remember
seeing you post something like that, and it was more like,
yeah. Totally.
There was like there was no judgment, or there was no nothing, but it was like, it was a non-issue, basically. What I'm saying is like, oh, good for her.
Totally. And I had to, it was like almost like I came out, right? Like, oh, actually I'm secretly a bartender. Like, you know. And I remember there was this like specific moment that happened when the White House hosted a travel bloggers session.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah,
you were there. And I went, and I was talking to women that I like always admired, like Pauline Fromer and Samantha Brown. And it was like the greatest 2 days of my life. And then I took the mega bus back to New York. I put on a bar rag, and I opened up a basement dive bar. And I felt like Cinderella after the ball. And I was like, this is my life right now, but this isn't always going to be my life. And it's not that bartending isn't great. Like, there are people who do it full time as a career. It's just wasn't what I wanted. Yeah. I mean, recognizing that and making the leap took quite some time after that. But I remember feeling like ashamed that I still had to bartend, because all these other women were so successful just in and of their businesses, and why couldn't my business be enough? And once I started sharing that and being like, I'm hustling, this is how I'm doing it, then I felt like people started really getting behind me. And that's kind of how my community was built up, because they're like, man, we see you out there. You're not just, born wealthy. You didn't just start this business with money in your pocket. I worked for every dollar. And so that being authentic, I think, helps combat that too, because it's like, well, you can use whatever excuse that you want, right? I could never run a marathon. I could never do that. It's like, you probably could, but what's important to you?
Right. So, where do you want to spend your time? So what's changed for you since you've come out this way?
I feel a lot more clear-headed. I'm a lot more creative. I love my living space currently.
You've got an amazing space here. I love it.
It's like a hug. I love my home. Lots of natural light, and I have stillness and peace that I didn't have in New York. So a lot of things have changed, and then along with that, my priorities have changed, right? I don't really care if I ever get written about in another magazine ever again. I really don't. I don't care about that kind of stuff. I really am just focused on building my community here, spending time with people who enrich my life in different capacities, and trying to fulfill the projects that I have floating around in my head that are maybe outside of the travel industry, like this book, for example. But then, I have other ideas and goals that I want to start achieving.
Do you feel like as soon as you moved here, it was kind of like the universe was like, yes.
Yes.
Everything just kind of gelled for you?
Absolutely. I mean, outside of the initial 10 minutes where I was crying and freaking out, yes. I feel like this is my home for life. Mm-hmm. I have never said that about a place that I've lived before, but I felt like everything fell into place when I moved to Portland. I met an amazing group of girlfriends through one person that I knew pretty casually in New York, who had moved out here a couple of years before. And she created this whole Facebook group, which now there are 1,000 women that do happy hours and book clubs and all sorts of things. I found people here really will take the time to get to know you and don't care what you do. Like, I remember going to a big meetup and not one person asked me what I did. It's so different than New York City, where it's like, who are you? What are you doing? What can I get from you?
Are you worth my time?
How can I benefit from this conversation, right? So it's a totally different, and it was so necessary for me because I was getting so tired of that. But
you probably didn't know it until you experienced something different, though, right?
I think I wrote a Facebook post about it, and I was like, I just went out and had lunch with people for 2 hours, and not once did they ask me what I did for money. Like, that is so different and so refreshing. It's like, who are you? And that gave me the time to say, like, who am I, right? What are my priorities outside of work and hustling and grit, like all the things that I have been doing that I know so well.
Well, who are you?
I am a person who believes firmly in the good in other people and wants to put more good into the world. I am the person who is a friend to many and will do anything for those friendships. I am a person who lives to help inspire other women and support other women however I can. And so that's important to me, you know? So it's not so much about the business of things anymore for me, so much as it is like, you know, I am a creative, and that's just always who I have been, and probably always who I will be, but that part of me was so neglected for so long.
What did you go to university for?
Journalism. Yeah, and creative writing. I got my minor in poetry.
So even though, that's what your degree is in, you were in New York, and during that time you had been working as a journalist. Yep. You didn't feel like you were quite so creative?
No, because I was writing for money is so different than just writing for emotion, pouring out feelings. As a human, I'm processing a lot of things now. Moving here was kind of like, okay, we're going to actually do some work. And so I started seeing a couple of hypnotherapists, and I started doing some like Reiki, getting into yoga, getting into like moving my actual body. And these things have enriched my spirit, which has made me more productive in other ways. So it's just a shift in lifestyle. And I went back to New York maybe a month ago. And I don't want to like poo-poo on New York, right? It's great for so many people. But I went back and I just was so tired. I went back and it was loud and noisy, and people were honking at me and grabbing at me and asking me and whistling at me and all these things. And then I get back to my old apartment. I walk in the door, and my former roommate is sitting on the couch crying about how she doesn't have any money. And I'm like, oh my God, nothing has changed. Like, this place is exactly the same, but I've changed. Like, I'm not in that space anymore. Yeah,
I don't know how people do it in New York. I grew up in New Jersey and, spent time popping in and out of New York and never really felt comfortable. It's interesting now. I probably feel more comfortable in the city than I ever have. Just I can navigate the subway system better, and that's a big part of it. And I also love to just go and walk everywhere. I'll walk, from Greenwich Village up to Broadway, and up to 42nd Street and stuff. Yeah, I just don't know how people can do it.
Yeah,
like I don't know how you can have people will argue that they can, but I don't understand how you can have a healthy headspace.
Yeah,
and be living there.
I think really what it started to come down to was like, I can't walk down the street without somebody noticing, saying something, whistling at me, things like that kind of stuff. I can't ride the subway without people staring at me, talking to me. Like it just became exhausting. And that was my own personal experience with it, right? And when I look back on everything, I am immensely thankful. I am thankful for New York. I am thankful for that like grit. I'm thankful for those years of bartending, which really hardened me up, and taught me how to say, no, you can't have another one. And I'm sorry, that's just how it is. Like it did a lot for me. I'm thankful to my stepfather. I am for as much as I hate him still in a lot of ways. I'm thankful that I had to be forced to take care of myself. And I'm thankful for the years that I spent penniless, hustling, eating beans out of a can, trying to create businesses. I'm thankful for all of it. I'm thankful for it now. I'm immensely thankful to live in Portland in a space that feels like a hug, in a space that feels like pushes me to be creative because it's beautiful and it feeds me. And I'm thankful for the flexibility of my schedule and the women who come on my tours and the women who come to Women's Travel Fest. And I'm thankful for all of it. you know.
Are you in touch with your stepfather?
No.
Not at all. How long has that been?
I haven't seen him in probably 2 years, and I'll have to see him at my sister's upcoming wedding, but I don't intend on seeing him ever again after that. So it sucked.
Yeah.
It did. It was hard. And like he and his oldest son, my stepbrother, that was like their game, right? To like who could torture me the most.
How much older is?
He's 5 years older. But, you know, and it was like one of them would put a pillow over my head and the other would sit on my legs until I stopped kicking, like, you know, things like that. One would pull me underwater and then the other would be up top pushing me back down when I surface for air. Like things, they're just awful. And the constant, like, you're fat, you're not enough, you're never going to create anything, you're going to be a stripper, you're going to be a loser, like all of these sorts of things. It's like years and years and years and years of that. And then in my 30s, it started to come out. And I was like, hey, I never really dealt with this, I guess. And so now I feel like maybe it's the time that I need to deal with that. And you know, I don't think New York could have been a place where I did that because I never had the peace. I never could have afforded a place on my own there. I always had people around me. I never had like the solitude that you need to process traumas and deal with that and you know, regroup your soul and figure out what your next step is. And so I'm thankful to Portland.
Well, the fact that you're so grateful today for everything, and I don't think that that's just like, ooh, Kelly's a grateful person today. Like, I think that's part of your fabric. I think that is, you couldn't have the businesses that you do have without having a grateful personality.
It does make me really upset when I meet people who have beautiful lives and don't recognize that. And I don't know if it's inherent to who you are or if it's a product of your environment, but every beautiful thing that has happened to me, I recognize and I thank and I name and I list, you know?
But I think we all have beautiful lives in one way or another. I think so much about, you step on a bus, on a public bus, and you can either have a bus driver who's like super grumpy, doesn't say a word, just is doing his or her job, or you have the bus driver who's like, hey, how's everybody doing today? We're coming up on the Pike Place Market. If you've never been here, you should get off right now and go have an Eleanor's yogurt because it's the best thing on the planet. You know, you just have a difference. And I just think there's two ways to live life. And hey, I'm not always the chirpy one telling you all about what you could do at Pike Place Market, but I'm not the grumpy one who doesn't say hello and ask how you're doing at the checkout stand.
And I mean, taking women traveling, right? For Damesly, I've seen so many different personality types. And it does seem to be pretty consistent. Like either you're there to have a good time or you're there to find reasons not to have a good time. Right?
Yes, exactly. And it's not, you usually don't set out to have a good time and then have a bad time.
Yeah.
You usually set out to have a bad time and to find complaints.
Totally.
And then that's the person who complains about the previous tour company that they used too.
Yes.
And
I had that exact situation.
Yeah. So it's always the tour
always
company.
Them. Yep. And you know, there's nothing, that stuff sticks with you though. For someone like me, probably someone like you, people who pour their heart into what they do, like, I want everyone to have the best time ever. I want you to walk away from one of my tours feeling like you have a new set of girlfriends, you have a support system that you didn't have, you've seen more parts of the world that you haven't seen. Like, I want you to have a good time. But if you're so focused on the things that are wrong or bad, like, you know, in Cuba, the public toilets don't have toilet seats. Like, well, guess what? It's Cuba. There isn't just a toilet seat store here. You know, like it's different. And I think travel, but I also think like travel does great things to us in that it pushes us out of our comfort zone. And so maybe, and I hope that this is the case, maybe those women who come and complain about these things and aren't having a good time, maybe they get home and they look back on the experience and they see it in a different light. That's what I hope. That's
the nice thing. I mean, that's the nice way to look at it. But I think that if somebody's showing up and complaining about the lack of a toilet seat or whatever it is.
Mosquitoes.
Yeah, mosquitoes.
Sorry, I forgot to fumigate for you.
Yes. Yeah, if I think they're going home and probably still complaining about whatever.
And that's just not a way to live your life.
No,
it's not how I want to live my life. So
no, there's too many great things. Yeah. Is there anything that you want to cover that we haven't chatted about?
I feel like we've covered a lot.
Yeah, we have.
No, I'm excited about the future and next steps, and I'm so thankful to you for the opportunity to chat about life.
Thank you for this last minute. I am down here to record with someone who just had this really short window of opportunity to record. So I zipped down here from Seattle, and I was like, who else is in Portland? Oh my God, Kelly's in Portland. I've got to let me see. So thank you for making the time. And you probably said yes so that you don't have to work on your book.
Yeah. No, I'm going to work on it later. I know.
Okay, good.
You never get away.
Yeah. Hey, I'd like to end these conversations by asking the guest, what does it mean to you to be bold?
Ooh, to be bold. I think for me, it means, that's a really good question. To me, being bold means living authentically to your truth. And so, because it sometimes takes a lot to be authentic to your truth, whatever that looks like. I think society-wise, there are always people in your life or in our communities that are pulling for you to fail. And so being bold means putting yourself out there despite that and living your true purpose as authentically as you can, whether that means you're creating businesses or you come out to your family or you just wear whatever the hell you want,
Or you get tattoos.
Or you walk down the street unafraid. Being bold means to me living a bigger, authentic life.
Mm-hmm. Where can people find you? Website, social media, that sort of thing, and I'll post the links in the show notes for it.
Totally. You can always find me. I'm at GoKellyLewis or GoKellyLewis.com, and then my businesses are Damesly, Women's Travel Fest, and Go Girl Guides.
Awesome. Kelly.
Yeah, so much fun.
I know. Thank you again, really, for the last minute. Yes, on your part. I really appreciate it. And it's been just like pretty fantastic to sit down with you and really get to know you. Because we've just had really quick exchanges.
I've seen you on stage so many times, but we've never talked about our childhoods.
I know. Yes, exactly. Thanks. Enjoy Portland. That was really a lot of fun for me to get to know Kelly, and now to have her in the Pacific Northwest. That's so exciting for me. If you enjoyed that conversation, there are a number of other women in the travel business that I've spoken with, including Samantha Brown, television host. In episode number 36, I spoke with Patricia Schultz. She's the author of 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. That's episode number 52. You might check out Pauline Fromer in episode number 40. And also the female nomad herself, Rita Golden Gelman. She's episode number 21. So lots of travel talk if you enjoy that. You can find those and all of my other episodes at shesboldpodcast.com/episodes or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. In the next episode of the She's Bold podcast, I sit down with an astrophysicist. Yep. Can you believe that? Sarah Tuttle is an assistant professor of astronomy at the University of Washington. And we sit down, we talk about space, we talk about diversity in the sciences, and so much more. I think you'll really like that episode. If you'd like to support the show and let me know how much you are inspired by these conversations and how much you look forward to hearing the uplifting stories from my guests, go to patreon.com/bebold. Patreon supporters get to submit questions for me to ask guests and become part of our private Facebook group, and that is ladies only. They also get access to bonus content, including questions I ask of the guest. This week, you'll find out about how Kelly goes from an idea to actually creating something like a women's travel fest. To keep up with me and all of my travels and my running these days, you can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram at both Beth Witwa and Wandergal. So BETHWHITWA and Wandergal. Feel free to leave a message or questions at 877-280-5170. I love feedback. You can also email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com. And I should mention that I'm actually starting to get some ideas from listeners for future deep dive episodes with Chris Fagan. So if you have suggestions for topics, do let me know. Ladies, you can join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Be Bold group for support and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. And until next time, be bold.